Hello, everyone. This is Terrence Cheng. I'm Chancellor of the Connecticut State Colleges and University System. I'm the host of this podcast, Office Hours. Through candid discussions, Office Hours explores the intersection of education, leadership, and economic growth. We will hear from state, higher education, business, and industry leaders, as well as students and faculty, who will share valuable perspectives that inspire and empower listeners on their educational and professional journeys as we delve into the key issues impacting higher education across Connecticut. Joining me today is Department of Economic and Community Development Commissioner Dan O'Keefe. Dan was nominated by Governor Ned Lamont as the next Commissioner of DECD in November of 2023. Prior to that, he served as Connecticut's first Chief Innovation Officer. He is a passionate advocate for Connecticut's economy and focuses on economic growth, workforce development, vibrant communities, and job creation. Prior to entering public service, Dan was a technology investor for 25 years, investing in high-growth, innovative companies in the software, consumer, and fintech markets, companies that went on to create tens of thousands of jobs. Commissioner O'Keefe, thank you so much for joining me today.
My pleasure. Great to be here.
Tell us a little bit about the role as Commissioner of DECD, the Department of Economic and Community Development.
Sure. So I started this journey, as they call it, last summer. First, as you mentioned, as Chief Innovation Officer for the state. That's a role I still hold. That dovetails well with my background, which is mostly centered around technology and technology investing. Mm-hmm. And then was nominated by Governor Lamont to take on this broader role, this commissioner role, in November of last year, and was confirmed in March. So this is all quite new. The role is traditionally defined, if you think about the DECD, so it's the Department of Economic and Community Development. I think of it as those two halves, the E, which is supporting our economy and its continued growth, job creation, workforce development, et cetera. And then the C, which is community development. That's investing in and protecting, extending the vibrancy of our communities. And I think both are equally important right now. If you look at the trends post-pandemic, Connecticut really benefited from a pandemic none of us wanted. What the pandemic did was it rewrote some rules and allowed folks to have a little bit more flexibility on where to live. It afforded more flexibility in terms of commute, which allowed people to really kind of choose Connecticut, just given its high quality of life and a great place to raise your family, et cetera. Right. So what we've seen coming out of the pandemic is an acceleration in our economy and an acceleration in our population trends. And so that's why I think actually the work of the DECD is so incredibly important, because those are the two trends that we as the DECD seek to support and continue and to accelerate.
Yeah, you're really coming in at, let's think back to a time when there was such a nexus of kind of change and evolution and opportunity.
If you look at the years prior to the pandemic, there's something they now refer to as the lost decade, which is that in Connecticut, it's the years coming out of the global financial crisis. So 2008, 2018. Mm-hmm. Over that time period, our economy on an inflation adjusted basis got smaller. And also during that time, the popular opinion of our fiscal backdrop was that it was described as in a permanent state of fiscal crisis. Right. And that was an accurate description of our then fiscal picture. And the reason is because our economy is over-indexed towards cyclical end markets. So 14% of our economy, 13, 14, depending on when you look, is finance and insurance. That's indexed towards capital markets. And 12% is manufacturing. But for us, what that really means is advanced manufacturing in support of our national defense. We've got a very large national defense business in Connecticut. Right. And that, I hate to put it this way, but that's over-indexed towards global unrest. Right. So our economy in the state of Connecticut is naturally cyclical. And there was a period of time where we would spend all the money when we had it and then cut programs when we had deficits. And that's no way to run a business. That's no way to run a family's finances. That's no way to run certainly a state government. So fiscal guardrails were put in place in 2017. And essentially all they said was, we're going to manage the state's finances just like all of you manage your home finances. It's just a natural way. And since then, we've now had 5+ years of consistent surpluses. Our system produced $11 billion in surpluses over that time. We used that to pay down our unfunded pension liabilities by almost $8 billion. We maxed out our rainy day fund, which is the fund that's meant to get us through the next recession, at $3.3 billion, which is its statutory cap. It is just such a dramatically different picture today than it was during that time period.
Absolutely.
The pandemic was the shock to the system that our system needed.
What I love about what you said is that it helps folks understand not just where we are, but where we came from. That's a really remarkable journey that the state has been on. So let me ask you about some of the companies and some of the industries and sectors that you've engaged with in these past few months. I mean, what are they going through? What are some of the biggest challenges and what are some of the biggest opportunities, right? Again, one of the things I would love for us as a state to do more is to really celebrate the opportunities and take a big dose of ambition and say, hey, this is a big one. We need to take a big swing at this.
Like any economy, and we have both our opportunities and our challenges, and so I'll mention both. On the opportunity side of things, it's GDP growth acceleration and it's population trend accelerations. That is, both are economic contributors. And on the economy accelerants, if you actually break down what portions of our economy are performing well when compared to other states in the U.S. overall, our manufacturing sector, it's growing. It's growing after a period of decline. And it's growing, I think, partially because the federal government has reprioritized the onshoring and the nearshore of the supply chains feeding national defense. Right. And that's been a great thing for the state of Connecticut. We have some very large national defense primes here. And the other thing I always like to point out is we make complicated things here. We have a culture of invention. The Polaroid camera was invented in Bridgeport, Connecticut. That was an invention in around optics. And then fast forward to today, we have ASML, which is makes photolithography machines. These are the machines that create every semiconductor in the world. That's a European-based company, but their North American headquarters is right here in Wilton, Connecticut. Right. We make nuclear submarines here. We make incredibly complicated things here because we have one of the best, most well-trained, highest educated workforces in the world. But those are the areas where we have real comparative advantage. So the good news is we are seeing growth in our core sectors. Now, the challenge is, because again, with growth becomes constraints, and those constraints are multiple. We do have a workforce shortage. We need to continue to invest in our workforce. Someone once said to me, well, you can't manufacture people. And I said, no, you can. Economically, you can. It's called keeping our graduates here when they graduate from school. And by the way, you and the state college do a phenomenal job with that. And then two, you attract people to our state. It's international in-migration, domestic in-migration. And that's why these population trends matter so much. From a local economy perspective, we're effectively manufacturing people. Right. So what do? We continue to invest in training our workforce of the future, helping our higher ed and our education system generally be aware of where some of these opportunities are coming. Right. And we continue to support the things that make Connecticut such an incredible place to live. High quality education, high quality healthcare, high quality of life generally, a safe community, just a great place to raise a family. All the reasons why I moved here when I did.
Absolutely. And again, that's one of the things I really appreciate about the state is that you can really have any kind of lifestyle you want. You can almost have any kind of career that you want as well. And I'm so happy to hear you talk about the return of manufacturing to a level of success and need, because we have manufacturing programs and, our goal is to link every single one of our manufacturing students to the opportunities for those employers. And not everyone will go work directly with EB or Sikorsky or Pratt, but maybe they will work for those smaller manufacturers that are doing all the subcontracting with those big companies. And so we want to connect that there. But I'd love to get your take now on that bridge, right? That bridge between higher ed and the needs in our industries, with our companies, in our communities. What's working well? What's not so great that we can improve upon? What can we continue to build together? Because our goal is ultimately to continue to be one of the core pistons of the engine for the entire state, especially when it comes to just making people and industries and communities better.
We have more jobs than people to fill them. If you look at the types of jobs where some of those gaps exist, Manufacturing is one of our largest areas, so we need to continue to train workers to be able to avail themselves of those opportunities. Nursing continues to be our biggest challenge. That is a pandemic result. Everything I just mentioned was point in time and specific. And while, again, I'd love to see, another 10,000 nurses get produced by our system tomorrow. But when you talk about education and the skills that we might impart, we run the risk, if we're being overly prescriptive as to what types of jobs we want to produce workers to fulfill,
right?
Because those will change. And there's a long lead time in education. You have to build up the curricula. You have to build up the faculty. It just takes time to build an education system. So what I actually think we just continue to do is continue to build a flexible system, continue to help people understand how to think, communicate, and allow them to have the foundation and the base to then go off and take some of these jobs and learn on the job. And that's what I actually think really works, is when you have a partnership. Take the state out of it completely. When you have a partnership between industry, meaning the supply of jobs, and education, meaning the producer of workers, then that is when I think the system is as optimized as it can or should be.
Yeah, that's great. And I could not agree more, right? And in all the time I've been in higher education, especially in Connecticut, those relationships and that bridge, when they're strong, they're effective, they're productive. And when they're not as strong, you definitely feel the impact of that. And I also really appreciate the fact that you're talking about that kind of flexibility and not being too prescriptive. I fear that we are heading towards a path where it is very much about get this 1 degree to do this one job. And then when that job is no longer there, well, heck, we're in a lot of trouble. But where would you love to see the state and CSCU really kind of invest in let's call it a targeted flexibility, right?
Yeah.
We're targeting a certain industry or a certain sector, but we want to be flexible to be adaptable.
I don't want to predict the specificity of how we might train individuals today. I want to build the systems that are flexible in nature to allow, as the nature of work evolves and therefore the nature of training evolves, we need to have the flexibility in our systems to stick and move, to adopt and to adapt.
So, I didn't know this. You're a board member and the emeritus chairperson of the Opportunity Network. So, talk to us about that. What about the organization, about your experience, all of it?
OpNet, as it's affectionately known, it's an organization that I sit in awe of. OpNet's been around for over 20 years now. And what we do is we work with students from historically marginalized communities. We work with them for the last 2 years of their high school, all 4 years of college. And the way I think of it is we kind of wrap them with the relationships and the skills that, folks from, let's call them families of means, have access to. And so it's everything from, how do you network? How do you get internships? How do you write a professional email? How do you prepare for an interview? How do you find opportunities when you're in one? How do you work internally to find other opportunities? How to really advocate for yourself? Those are some of the things that OpNet focuses in and around. And these are just incredible. I'm going to call them incredible kids. They're adults. Clearly, I'm just so old now that they feel like kids to me. But these are incredible students. And for me, I grew up with kind of a chaotic background. The way I look at it is I'm blessed. I got super lucky. I got lucky because I had a mother who was a school teacher and taught us to be intellectually curious. I got lucky because I had a quirk for math, and that got me into certain schools and allowed me to pursue an investment career. I got lucky because I came of age commercially at the dawn of the internet, and so had an investment career focused on what ended up being like the Gilded Age, similar to electricity and the locomotive. This was a massive economic engine that I was fortunate enough to participate around. And then I got lucky in that I met the governor and figured out there was a path in public service to sort of give back. And that's where I'm really focusing my time is, I feel so lucky to have even the ability to consider this. And so now to have an opportunity like this to really give back and try to have a real long-term impact, that's where I'm spending my time. I view OpNet and the work that it does as, a big part of my life mission, to use use whatever privileges I have been afforded, to use whatever voice I now have to shine a light on some of these challenges.
I would love to eventually, I know you're kind of busy putting 25,000 miles on your car in less than a year, but maybe in one of those trips, we get you to our campus or one of our campuses, get you to meet with some of our students, get you to speak with some of our faculty. I think your voice and your story and all of the kind of the lens through which you're seeing all this work is super motivational and inspiring. I love all of that. So I think we're up to the final section, the kind of lightning round of sorts. As a tech investor, what was the first company you invested in?
I think of my first investment as the first one I put my stamp on and said, I'm going to get behind this, and this is really my deal. And it was a company called Haley Systems, which was eventually acquired by Oracle. So it's no longer around. But why it's kind of funny is that was an investment I made in early 2004. So 20 years ago. And it did natural language processing it was essentially artificial intelligence. You could code using natural language. I should also mention, by the way, my first investment in Connecticut.
Yeah.
Business called OutlookSoft. OutlookSoft was based in Stamford, Connecticut. They did it was called CPM, Corporate Performance Management Software. So business intelligence, effectively, and ultimately sold to SAP, a very large German-based software company.
Excellent. So, and again, I don't want you to give away any trade secrets, but is there a big initiative you're working on now as DECD commissioner that really is kind of got you excited?
I'm really trying to get the word out on innovation clusters, which is a $100 million program that the governor and I announced 2 weeks ago. Innovation clusters, the idea is to support the application of some of these step function changes in horizontal computing. So the emergence of quantum computing, which is a step function change in compute, and the emergence of artificial intelligence, again, a step function change in terms of the ability to interpret and act on all of the data that's expected to come from the emergence of quantum computing. Those should have fundamental applications to industries in which we have comparative advantage, specifically bioscience, biotech, around drug discovery, fintech, SureTech, and then also what we call advanced manufacturing, which for us, again, really is the supply chains focused on our national defense, where we're seeking to invest in the infrastructure supporting those trend lines. And part of why that's so important, by the way, for the economy of Connecticut is if you think about our largest markets, it's finance, insurance, advanced manufacturing, and healthcare. So what I just described are the technology-driven accelerants, the reimagining of those very large industries. So we're seeking to help our large financial services become fintech, insurance services become insurtech, et cetera, et cetera.
What's your favorite hobby?
My favorite hobby, I have teenage girls. Well, specifically, I have a 15-year-old and a 12-year-old. So I have a teen and a preteen. My favorite hobbies are really anything that forces them to hang out with me. So it tends to trend towards skiing in the winter and boating in the summer.
Excellent. What about a favorite holiday?
I like to cook. And so my favorite holiday is Thanksgiving. I host my whole family. It's typically between 15 and 20 people. I do 2 turkeys prepared differently.
Wow.
I think Thanksgiving wins.
That's great. Couple more. What's the one skill you think all students should try to learn?
Communication. I referenced it earlier. I think the greatest piece of career advice I ever received was to speak only when you have something to say, and then say it with the fewest words possible. And that's one thing I've really tried to work on. And I find that if you can do that, and I'm not going to suggest I do it perfectly, but if you can do that, that's when you can be the most effective. When people will listen when you speak with succinctly and with content rather than with volume.
Your answer might answer this question as well, but any, advice for those students who are either about to enter the workforce or who just entered the workforce, what would you tell them?
Be intellectually curious. Honestly, something I find with people earlier in their careers, they tend to not speak up as often, probably as I remember feeling, for fear that they just don't understand something. They don't want to sound stupid, right? The concept of sounding stupid. And I would just say, the way you learn any industry or function is in practice. And the greatest accelerant you can have in any career is a willingness to ask the questions, willingness to really engage, bring energy to the process of being intellectually curious. And I think that is something that will serve everyone well.
That's wonderful. Dan, thank you so much. Thanks for taking the time. We really appreciate it, all you're giving to the state. And again, just the generosity of time and spirit here today. I think we're super fortunate, super lucky to have you as the Commissioner of DECD. I've had the fortune of knowing the folks in that role, leading up to your appointment. And I think you're just going to continue to carry that torch in a really fantastic way for us. So thanks so much for taking the time and taking on this big responsibility.
Now, thank you for saying that. And look, I continue to love the job. I continue to love the state. So I'm really, really enjoying the time and the opportunity to give back.
Well, thanks for tuning in to Office Hours. I'm Terrence Cheng, Chancellor of the CSCU system. Please be sure to subscribe to our podcast and listen in to future episodes where we discuss the importance of higher education and why higher education should be a part of Connecticut's growth strategy with state and business leaders and students and faculty.